Hi, I'm Pat Murphy with the Christian Science Monitor, and I'm talking today with Kelsey Timmerman, the contributing writer to the cover story in the July 22nd issue of the Christian Science Monitor Weekly. First of all, Kelsey, thanks for joining us, and tell us a little bit about how this quest to find out where our food and clothing comes from started for you.
Well, it really all started with a T-shirt, which is kind of a weird thing, I guess, to say, but it did. So I graduated college with a degree in anthropology. I quickly put to use traveling and working as a scuba diving instructor in Key West, Florida. And I would go places and I'd get stories and I'd write those stories. And some of those stories actually appeared in the Monitor's essays in the home forum section. And I was looking for that next destination to go to and visit and get stories, and I didn't need much of an excuse to go anywhere. So I had this T-shirt. It said, "Come with me to my tropical paradise," and it had tattoo from Fantasy Island on it. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go wherever this shirt was made. So I looked at the tag and it said made in Honduras. So I went to Honduras and I went jungle hiking, island exploring, taught an island village to play baseball, and but at least I thought that I came here because the shirt was made in Honduras. The least I could do is go to the factory where it was made and try to meet some of the workers. So I show up at the factory and I'm wearing the shirt. I'm like, "Hey, can I have a tour of your factory?" And they're like, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" And I couldn't get a tour of the factory, but I was able to wait for some of the workers to be let out. And there I met a fellow by the name of Emil Carr, who was 25. He lived with his parents and liked to play soccer. And that's about all I learned about him at that moment. And you know, deep down, I had a lot of questions for him. I think back to some of my sociology classes in college, and we talked about things like sweatshops and child labor, and what are the working conditions in a place like this where our clothes come from. And I didn't ask any of those questions. I think deep down, I really didn't want to know the answers to those questions. So I went on my merry way, and then just really started to eat at me that I didn't know what life was like for the people who make our clothes. So I set out on a global quest to find out. So I went to Bangladesh, where I had a pair of boxers. From there, I had my All-American Levi's blue jeans were made in Cambodia, and my flip-flops were made in China. And I just simply went to go find out what the workers' lives were like and what their reality was like. And that label watching of the clothes eventually led to a label watching of food as well, that led to my next project, which ended up being my book, Where Am I Eating?, where I went to some of the places that were featured in the cover story as well.
I thought it was really interesting in reading your story, both the cover story and also the subsequent sidebars, how it was like a catch-22. There were people that worked on farms but weren't able to make a decent enough living, so they would leave and go to the cities where the factories were, where maybe they went from helping raise food to helping to make clothing, and so it was just kind of a vicious cycle back and forth for a lot of these folks in different developing countries.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to sort out where opportunity is. So the factory collapsed, and that woman that was stuck in the factory in Bangladesh for 17 days, she came out and said, "I'm never working in a garment factory again." Yet
Right.
you also have a banana worker in Costa Rica who is telling the younger workers, like, leave, go do something else, find opportunity somewhere else because there is none here. So depending on where you are in the global economy and in the world, the opportunity can be pretty elusive, and that's really something I wanted to focus on and capture with the story. Is look at the different perspectives of the people that I met, to see them striving for this opportunity and struggling to find it in some cases, and seeing how this line between opportunity and sometimes exploitation can blur. You have like workers in Cambodia that I met, that I write about, the women I met that work in the blue jeans factory, who during the financial crisis, when that happened, we stopped in the United States, we stopped buying so much clothes, and millions of workers around the world lost their jobs in garment factories. And some of the girls I met, Nari and I write about in the piece. Her name's AI, and so she actually lost her job at the garment factory and moved back to the village with her family. And it turns out a few months went by, and she wasn't able to really help her family out much there because they were relying on the income she was sending back from the city. And she ended up going to get a job at a the place that, like at a hotel, being like a chambermaid, I guess, and you know, cleaning rooms and things like that. So you know, there again, she lost the opportunity in the city. She went back to the village, hoping to find something there. And one of her coworkers actually went back to the village and got married to a school teacher. And now she lives back in the village. So there is this struggle. There's a great book about this exodus from the city to the from the farm to the city called Arrival City. I don't remember the author's name right offhand, but it talks about how by the year 2050, 70% of the world's population will live in cities.
Wow. Speaking of the tragedy in Bangladesh earlier this year, have you been able to find out, have there been real changes made when it comes to building safety, worker safety in some of these countries like Bangladesh and other developing countries when it comes to clothing manufacturing?
Yeah, I don't know if, I think time will tell on some of that. So I've been following the news closely and reports and different groups that I talk with. And so, you know, there's been some recent developments, specifically in Bangladesh after that horrible collapse where 1,100 people were killed. You know, that there, just today I was reading on a news outlet about how the government is putting some laws into place to give unions a little bit more power, to give workers a little bit more of a voice. You know, in these situations, also to work on the building code. Because the garment industry in Bangladesh was just manic. Like, it's growing so fast. You know, I think I visited there in 2007. I think it's doubled since then. When I was there, I mean, you know, it was just like going gangbusters, and so it's even more so now. And you had to the point where there were so many orders and so much demand that the factories were just like, okay, let's add another floor. And there weren't really a lot of building codes into place. And I've seen the construction in Bangladesh, and like it's you know, sometimes you see bamboo heavily incorporated in the structures, and before they put on like the concrete, and sometimes the stone that's used in the projects, they make the bricks in the countryside. They go out and they just, like, along the river, and they make, you know, mud blocks, and then they put them in a big furnace, like these tall stacks, and that's where they harden. And then they take those into the city, and then they just, women and children sitting and just breaking up blocks all day long, and that's how they make gravel, and that's one of their building materials. So you know, the materials that they have to work with aren't the best, and then the codes that have been in place have been largely kind of ignored. So as they're putting in these new laws, it's kind of, well, will it be enforced? And you can also look at it to see what has been the reaction of, you know, Western brands. So Disney actually looked at Bangladesh and said, well, we're not going to source anymore. They pulled their orders from Bangladesh, and, you know, I don't know exactly where those orders went, but probably not to a country that was a whole lot in a better situation than Bangladesh. You know, I don't know. And the Obama administration actually talked about how they were going to, and that they did this. They Bangladesh has some special trade privileges with the U.S. that they were going to remove that. So it was going to be a little bit more costly to bring in some of these goods. So, you know, on one hand, it's good to see the regulations possibly getting stronger, but you also have to worry that there's this tragedy of the factory collapsing. You know, if everybody abandons Bangladesh, like, it'll be another tragedy, and it'll be the garment industry leaving, and you have millions and millions of workers there. But this is like 3/4 of their exports are garments. You know, one of the few ways that Bangladesh can be a member of the global economy, and if that leaves Bangladesh, you know, then what happens?
Of course, our viewers can read Kelsey's stories at csmonitor.com, and I wanted to have you talk about some of the interesting people that you met in the course of your writing, in particular Solo, the young man who worked on a cocoa farm in Ivory Coast. And I really felt the chills that you wrote about when you heard him refer to his cocoa farm boss as master.
Yeah, I mean, that is a term that I never thought I would ever hear a human being refer to another human being. You know, like, slavery is alive and well in 2013. In fact, in Ivory Coast and Ghana, there are 160,000 forced adult laborers. So it's not, there's a lot of other solos out there. And you know, what the really hard thing to wrap my mind around, having met Solo, is this idea is like he ended up going back to the farm. Like, you know, I
Right.
kind of hatched a plan to give him a shot at making a decision on his own. Does he want to go back to Ghana? You know, does he want to go back to the farm and do whatever? You know, I never said, "Hey, Solo, I'm freeing you. You know, I am going to rescue you."
Right.
It was never that. I just kind of gave him a chance to make a decision, and he said he was going to go to Ghana, and then he kind of disappeared. And I heard through some other sources that later he was back on the farm, and to think that maybe that was his choice to go back there in this place that, you know, he wanted. He didn't really like it there. He didn't want to leave. He complained about the meals, and he had really no good reason to share that information with me at those points in time. Like, it wasn't like he ever I had any promise to take him anywhere or do anything or pay him any money. And but to think that line between exploitation and blur is that Solo could have, you know, he is a forced adult labor, right? International Labor Organization's standards, he is like considered a slave. Yet maybe he chose to go back. Like, that's a real possibility. He chose, or maybe he was taken back. But to not know, that just shows how this line between exploitation and opportunity can blur. And that's really something I hope the readers take away from reading these individual stories about how complex it is that this issue of slavery, which seems like a black and white thing, slavery equals bad. Like, who would choose that? But there are situations, and people are in certain situations in the world, and they come from places where there's so little opportunity that maybe that is the choice that they make.
And then you have coffee farmers in Colombia whose their product goes to a major corporation like Starbucks here in the United States, and they've never even heard of Starbucks. I found that kind of amusing.
Yeah, so it was, you know, I was not expecting that. You know, I worked with Starbucks. I tried to work with Starbucks a lot to contact them to be able to find where their farmers were, and they told me that was proprietary information. I found the farmers anyhow, because it's not too hard to find them when there's Starbucks logos all over homes. You know, Starbucks logo, and it's a program called Starbucks Cafe Practices, which is kind of their, you know, farmer and environmental, you know, treatment, like to treat farmers and the environment well. Like, that's their own in-house program that's supposed to do that. And to go there and see people with a Starbucks logo on their homes, and they've never heard of Starbucks, that was kind of surprising. And you know, I still, before the article came out, when I was working on the article for the Monitor, you know, my book came out in April, and I was still trying to get Starbucks to answer. I've been trying to get Starbucks to answer some of my questions for a year, and even before the article came out, I tried to get them again to answer my questions. And this time it wasn't just, you know, Kelsey Timmerman, some joker writing a book. It was Kelsey Timmerman, you know, writing an article for a very well-respected newspaper, the Monitor. So they actually responded, but they just said, we'll find someone to answer your questions. And I'm kind of still waiting for that. And that was Starbucks PR firm, and eventually they called me back on the day the article came out, which was this past Sunday. They called me and said, hey, we would like to lend our voice to the story. And it's like, ship has kind of sailed now, but I'm still looking forward to having that conversation with Starbucks, because I'm just completely perplexed. And I've talked with other people that have been to the same region that have seen those signs, and talked with farmers who also, those farmers, we don't really know who Starbucks is or what this program is. And even Starbucks' own report from 2011 states that 53% of the people that they consider to be in the program receive no benefit from this program. So,
That's an amazing stat. Also, you go to China and report on apple pickers there, and how their product ends up in apple juice in American stores. I wonder if the Chinese will ever get to taste the fruits of their labor and actually enjoy apple juice in China someday.
yeah, I don't know. It seems like an odd world that we live in, where people make something and they don't use that something, or they never tasted it really. So, like, one of the things, I met Mr. Fung, the apple farmer, who ended up appearing on the cover of the issue, and they just really kind of like welcomed me into their home, and I met their granddaughter, and fed me lunch and dinner, and they were just so nice. And we got to hang out on the farm, and one of the things I try to do to offer a thanks for letting me into their lives and answering all my barrage of questions was I went to the grocery store to get them kind of things that represented my trip, my where am I eating trip, where I went to Costa Rica for bananas and Colombia for coffee and Nicaragua for lobster, and try to find all these items and take them, like say, here, thank you. And I could find all those items, but I couldn't find any apple juice. That was the hardest thing to find. I mean, I did find there was like a tiny little container. We had to ask for it in this small buried section that obviously no one ever buys apple juice. So the people that to provide us with 60% of apple juice in the United States shelves is from China, and but they don't drink apple juice there.
Amazing. Listen, Kelsey Timmerman, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us, and thanks for interesting and thought-provoking articles for the Christian Science MonitorWeekly.
Well, thank you very much. I just hope everyone starts to think about where their stuff comes from and the impact that our lives have the impact on other people around the world, and the hope and opportunity and sometimes the lack of that our decisions as consumers can provide them. Thanks so much.